Good afternoon. We got any Mick Keith Rolling Stone fans in the house? Oh, good. I am in the right room. So I may have made a risky decision, but I'm going to do it. This is my best Mick impersonation, and I've been working on this for a little while, so I need you guys to judge me here a little bit. Thank you. Now, according to my calculation, as I thought about this, I figured that impersonation was going to fall somewhere between the following spectrum. Either offending you or making you laugh, and somewhere in between. And the reason that I chose to do it, because I was quite hesitant, was that Franz said, it is the unexpected that sets us apart. And as I was thinking backstage, what might actually set me apart, at least if I lay a complete egg this afternoon, you will all walk away and say, do you remember that moron who actually tried to do a Mick Jagger impersonation up on the stage? I want to start with a quote, and the quote is this: while it may seem small, the ripple effect of small things is extraordinary. For those of you that agree with this quote, can I get an oh yeah? Oh yeah. Fantastic. Now, I'm curious if you're like me, when you read this quote, does your mind immediately go to a place of optimism? If so, can I get an oh yeah? Cool. So I'm in a room full of optimists. I had a feeling that would be the case. As I was preparing for the talk today and this idea of moving from objectifying our people to humanizing our people, and I came across this quote, and I read it and I internalized it, I thought for sure that this room would be much like me. That when you read this quote, you're going to immediately default to, yeah, absolutely. While it may seem small, over time, the ripple effect of small things will be extraordinary positive. But what's interesting about it is I asked myself the question, is it possible that the inverse is also true? And I think it might be that over time, consistently, while it may seem small, the ripple effect of small things can be extraordinarily bad. Which is kind of a bummer to think about. So then what I did was began to think about this concept of how has business objectified people over the decades of received wisdom, of rituals, of habits, of institutional knowledge, of the things that we just do because that's the way it's always been done. And so I want to share a few of these rituals, habits, institutional knowledge, and I want us to think about them from the lens of, while it may seem small, the ripple effect of these small things may have actually led us to an extraordinarily bad place. And let's start with this. The quote that we've heard from every CEO or leader ever. Our people are our best asset. It's a cool quote, and I think it means well, except the Wikipedia definition of asset is an asset is any resource owned by the business. Anything tangible or intangible that can be owned or controlled to produce value and that is held by a company to produce positive economic value is an asset. Simply stated, assets represent value of ownership that can be converted into cash. Well, that sucks. I don't think any CEO ever thought about this quote that deeply. I know I never did. I don't think we mean to objectify people by referring to them as an asset. I have two wonderful daughters, 14 and 12. For all of you that have kids, would you ever say, my kids are my most important asset? No. So why are we doing that to our people? Second, new hire orientation. We hire somebody new, we bring in a bunch of people into our organizations. Typically the process, at least all of the ones that I've either been a part of or have bared witness to, go something like this. We herd them in a class, typically. We put them into a classroom, a boardroom, a conference room, a classroom. We hook up the fire hose and just start shooting. Company history, company values, company culture, company goals, the competitive landscape. It is this fire hose of one-way information, all geared to fill their brains with the necessary information that they're going to need to be successful in order for them to help the company hit its goals. It is a one-way street. That's a monologue. I don't think that's the best thing to do. Another one, once we hire these folks, we stick them into the org chart. Now, an org chart is absolutely necessary. You got to make sense of where do all these people fit and what functions do they belong. How do you make sense of how we're all going to work together? But most org charts I've seen, and likely most org charts you've seen, people are represented by boxes. And typically what's in those boxes is a function. And best case scenario, the person's name is in the box. So we put people in boxes by function, stack them in something that looks remotely close to this. And when we go to do reorganizations, those who are responsible for the reorganization start moving the boxes around. And it becomes somewhat, I'm not saying that it is a bad thing, you need to do it from time to time. But I think the unfortunate, unintended negative consequence of doing that when you're looking at something that looks remotely close to this is you actually forget. These are human beings. These are people. The relationships that exist in the imaginary lines on this chart, you don't see when you're moving it around. The teamwork, everything, the collaboration that happens. Again, another ritual, habit, institutional knowledge, set of received wisdom of the way that I think perhaps we have unintentionally, perhaps unconsciously objectified our most important asset. We sit down with our teammates. You counsel leaders in your respective businesses on performance evaluations. Performance evaluation process looks something similar to new hire orientation. You sit down with the employee. There's a period in review. It could have been the past 3 months, the past 6 months, the past 12 months. The supervisor gives the employee the summary of their year in review, their 6-month in review, goes through the specific goals or achievements that individual was responsible for, likely rates them on some sort of a scale anywhere between needs work to killing it, gives them their review, and off they go. A one-way monologue of how has that individual performed to help the organization reach its objectives. This one's one of my favorites. I've met a whole bunch of people. Thank you for laughing. I'll give those of you who need another second. So, isn't it interesting that when we meet leaders, whether it's in an interview, at a working party, a cocktail hour, wherever it is, one of the questions that inevitably comes up and is answered that somehow signifies the level of importance they have, or this badge of honor, is how many direct reports they have. Why are we referring to human beings as direct reports? As I think about that phrase, it's dehumanizing. It's just not necessary. How about referring to this honor and privilege of these are the lives I have the opportunity to impact? A subtle shift. Profit and loss statements, we need them. It's an absolutely critical measure of the business's performance, how it's doing month in, month out. And I don't have a better suggestion of where people should go. Clearly, there are salaries and bonuses that are tied to them. But I've got to imagine after decades and decades of looking at P&Ls and constantly being reminded through the P&L that the most important thing we've got going for us falls under the expense line over time is going to have an impact. Another unintended way I think we have inadvertently objectified people. So here we are. It's been talked about pretty much all day today. We've got an engagement problem. You know, Rick said it this morning, we're at an all-time high over the last 18 years at a whopping 34% of engagement. We're at a pretty low of about 13%, which leaves the other 50+% somewhere between sleepwalking through the day and doing just enough to get by. And I think part of the reason is because people are feeling objectified. People are feeling that their sole purpose when they come into work every day is to serve the business, and that's it. It's a one-way street. They're there to serve the business. And where is this leading us? To kind of a chilling place. Korn Ferry, one of the world's largest executive search firms, did a study in October of 2018, like 4 months ago. 2,000 people, they were asked a variety of questions of how is the workplace affecting their life. 76% of them said that the stress from work is greatly impacting their relationships. 66% of those same people said it is impacting their ability to get a good night's sleep. And I think we've learned enough that we all know that at the baseline of performance, regardless of what we do, is a good night's sleep. You don't get sleep, it's irreplaceable. You can't substitute it. There's not enough caffeine to drink to substitute a good night's sleep. Willis Towers Watson, an incredibly well-known HR consulting firm, did a study over the past 5 years looking at healthcare costs inside of businesses. Mental and behavioral healthcare costs are rising at twice the rate of every other healthcare cost inside a business. You've likely heard these statistics that have come from a variety of medical journals, that suicide is highest on Sunday night and heart attack is highest on Monday morning. We are killing people through our workplace practices. Have a good afternoon. Who needs a drink? All hope is not lost. Now, I'm a really simple guy. I'm going to share with you 4 inexpensive, if not free, simple, subtle shifts that you can take into your own practices or into the practices of the organizations that you work with, that over time, with the same level of consistency that these rituals and institutional knowledge and received wisdom and habits that we've been practicing over the last however many years, with the same level of consistency, you start doing these things, and I believe we can begin reversing all of this. And it's right there for the taking. It starts with, and we've heard it over and over today, first, just a slight change of perspective. And I think that slight change of perspective starts with every single leader in an organization simply thinking about the business being there to serve the people. Let's just start there. Let's introduce that. Tell you a quick story. About 3.5 years ago in Austin, Texas, I was attending the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit, and a gentleman was walking by right before the conference was about to start. There was a timer on the screen similar to the timer we saw here today, and it was counting down 30 seconds. He clearly needed a seat. You know, it's that mad rush before the conference begins. And I had a seat next to me. And he had these orange cufflinks on that were Legos. So it just, I don't know why. The orange stood out, they were Legos. I'm like, this guy's gonna be a crack up. So I'm like, hey, do you need a seat? He looked at me, he's like, that'd be great. So he came and sat down. We strike up a conversation. He runs an organization called Square Planet, based in Chicago, Illinois. Fast forward to about a month, 2 months ago, He and his wife relocate to Phoenix, Arizona. As a result of that first conversation he and I had, I was the one person he knew here. He really desired to get away from the Midwest weather and come enjoy what Arizona has to offer. Called me up, and I helped him find a real estate agent, and he ended up moving about a mile away from me. And from there, just blossomed a wonderful friendship. As he relocated his business, recruiting became a bit challenging. He was having a really hard time. Part of it is the market. And he is an unbelievable writer. So he wrote an ad for what is essentially a chief of staff role. Emailed it to me and said, hey, Brian, you've got 20 plus years of experience in the talent acquisition recruiting space. Can you take a peek at this and tell me, is this a good ad? And then if it is good, where should I run it? So I read it, and it was awesome. Like, this was just one of those ads that was as well written as an ad you could ever possibly want to read. And I'm thinking, I've got to give him something of value. He sent it to me. I don't want to just send it back and say, dude, you're good. So the longer I stared at it, I set it down, stared at it, set it down, stared at it, set it down, and I realized, and I've looked at a lot of recruiting ads. I spent about 11 years as one of the founding members of a job board here in town, so I've seen a lot of job ads in my life. And what struck me as really interesting is nowhere in the ad did the ad actually answer the question, what's in it for the potential candidate? Not what are the requirements, how much money might you get paid, what are the benefits, what are the culture? No. I'm talking like, what's really in it for them? And so I called him up. His name's Brian. I said, hey, Brian, I'm curious. I read your ad. It's awesome. But something is missing. And what's missing for me is the answer to the question of what's in it for me. We're in one of the most fiercely competitive talent markets I've seen in my career. I think if you actually started your ad with simply laying out what's in it for the candidate, start with, if you decide to apply for this job and become a member of our team, here's what you'll get, I think you'd be in better shape. And he's like, oh, okay, how do I do that? I said, well, let me ask you. If you were to go talk to your team and ask them and find out what matters to them, what is it that they're learning, how is their life getting better as a result of being a member of your team? And so we went off and did that and came back and shared with me sort of the results of this very informal survey. And what he learned is that his organization and his team feels a tremendous sense of psychological safety. That when they come to work, it's okay for them to say, I don't know the answer to this, I need help. And if somebody does raise their hand, someone will help them and then not use that person's inability or not having the answer to then go stab them in the back later to advance their own career at somebody else's expense. I'm like, okay, cool, that's awesome, that's important, let's put that in there. What else? The other thing I found out is I'm very generous in investing in my employees in terms of seminars, classes, online or otherwise, anything they want to do. It might not even be business related. I've sent members of my team to ceramics classes because they really are interested in ceramics. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. I'm not sure the business value, but I like it. Let's put that in there, that you will invest in your people. I said, what else did you find? He said, my people actually feel really fairly paid. I'm like, well, let's put that in there as well. So we ended up simply adding an entire section to the beginning of the ad that led with, if you choose to apply for this role and become a member of our team, here's what's in it for you beyond the normal stuff that you might expect everywhere else. Here's what sets us apart. And I think it's an excellent, easy way to begin differentiating opportunities given how fiercely competitive the market is right now. Once people are then hired, I think we've got an amazing opportunity around new hire orientation. I moderated a panel at the California HR conference, I think it was August or September, it's called PIRA, and I had the opportunity to interview the Chief Talent Officer for Indeed. And as I was doing a little bit of research around new hire orientation, I wanted to have some statistics to apply to the analyst brains in the room. And I found these stats from Burson by Deloitte, which is a fairly well-known research and consulting firm, a gentleman named Josh Burson, who's been in the space for a long, long time. And the result of the study, as you can see here, is 4% of churn happens on day one and 22% happens within the first 45 days. So we're hiring people, 4 out of 100 are bailing on day one. Which, okay, maybe we make some bad decisions. I can kind of live with that, but 22 out of 100 within the first month and a half, to me, that signals a bigger problem. So as I was talking with Paul, getting ready for this panel, we had a few conversations so that we could establish some rapport, and we started talking about new hire orientation. And Indeed's been growing like crazy. One of their newer offices is in Ireland. And so I asked him, what do they do? What does their new hire orientation process look like? And he said, Brian, we beta tested something new much earlier this year, and it's spreading like wildfire throughout the organization. Tell me what it is. Well, we've been hiring people in droves, like classes of 50 at a time, and Ireland is super hot. It's a big office there. So we're hiring big groups of people. The first thing we do right out of the gate is we put them into groups of 5 or 6 people, depending upon the size of the class. And we give them a business problem that Indeed is trying to solve right now. And then for the first 5 days, they have access to anything and everything and every person in the organization that they need to work on this problem. And here's what's really interesting. The groups aren't grouped by the function that they are going to be in when they join. You'd have accounting people and tech people and finance people and sales people. They'd be in these groups of multiple roles. On Friday, they present their ideas to an executive team. And what's so interesting to me is not whether or not the idea is the right idea. They may not even have enough information to have a great idea. The most important unintended positive consequence that has come from this reimagination of the new hire orientation process is weeks and months after orientation, when the employees go down to the cafeteria to have lunch, they're having lunch with people that they would have otherwise never spent any time with. And the silos that would typically exist between the departments inside the organization, those walls have been smashed completely. They're realizing the best thing we can do is put groups of people together, regardless of their background, give them a problem to work on. The worst case scenario is they build great relationships with one another, break down some silos. Best case scenario is they have an amazing idea we can then execute on. They save the culture, the history, the goals and all that for individual meetings with their departments afterwards. Reimagining new hire orientation. Performance evaluations. When Ellen Shook took over at Accenture, who, by the way, has like 330 plus, it's probably more than that, 1,000 people across the globe, they realized, and she realized, there's no way this stack rank system and evaluating employees that way is producing any value. This whole rear view looking approach to performance is insane. So what Ellen did was completely eradicated performance evaluations, approaches this now as performance achievement, looks through the windshield and focuses on, are the clarity of role expectations super clear? Are we focusing on the individual strengths? And are we moving them closer to their life dreams and aspirations in addition to their career dreams and aspirations? And it is having a revolutionary impact inside of an organization as large as Accenture. Org charts. Here's a novel idea. Let's put the picture of the employee on it. That's simple. That way, when we're reviewing it and we have to make changes, we just simply recognize by looking at it that these are people. These are human beings whose lives the leaders are entrusted to cultivate and grow and take care of while they're in their care. I think if we start doing some of these really, really simple things, we will begin to create a virtuous cycle. Of course, the people we hire, the people your clients hire, of course they have to do a job that serves the organization, but that does not absolve the organization's responsibility of doing everything they can to serve the needs of the people too. And I think if we establish a two-way street, we will get amazing long-term sustainable results. And I want to end with sharing with you a quote that had an enormous impact on me. With increased awareness comes more choice. With increased awareness comes more choice. These are simply opportunities I've made you aware of. It's totally up to you what makes sense, what doesn't, what could fit, what doesn't fit. But you now have the choice. And I believe, once made aware, once consistency of choosing happens, we can return back to where we all agreed at the very beginning and not have to ever worry about the negative of this amazing quote that while it may seem small, the ripple effect of small things is extraordinary, and only focus on the positive. It has been an honor and a pleasure, especially being in a fellow group of some Rolling Stones fans. Thank you very much.